All right,
Absolutely.
we are transitioning to an all-star CXO roundtable and excited to welcome Mark Nemec, CRO of SalesLoft, to lead the roundtable on the agent-driven revenue framework. With over 20 years in enterprise sales leadership at Cisco and Salesforce, Mark now leads global revenue team at SalesLoft and is helping companies to close more, forecast accurately, and coach teams to excellence. Mark, super excited to host you here. How are you doing?
Awesome, Julie. So nice to see you. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, this is a very long-awaited panel and anticipated one. Let's do a quick round of introductions, everyone. James Roth.
Sure. Hey, Julia. Great to see you. It's great to be here. Mark, always good to join with a friend. So excited for this panel. I'm the CRO at ZoomInfo.
Hannah.
Yeah,
Welcome.
nice to see all of you. Excited for this panel. I'm Hannah Wilson. I'm the CRO of Nooks.
Yeah, Santi.
Hi, everybody. I'm Santi Suarez Ordonez. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Momentum.
Angela.
Hey, everyone. Excited to be here. I'm Angela. I lead growth and marketing at Invisible Technologies and excited to be the solo marketer on the CRO panel.
And Aaron. Gonna bring Aaron onto the show. Boom. Aaron, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Live TV.
Thanks
right on time.
Nice to be here. Nice to see everyone. Aaron McReynolds, co-founder, CEO of Alicia.
Amazing. What a panel. Mark, what's on your mind?
Awesome. Oh, well, thanks, Juliette, for helping everybody get introduced and folks for being here today. The topic that we're going to discuss amongst the group here is AI and agents, and in a couple different ways. How we're building those agents and those capabilities into our own organizations and our own go-to-market models. How we're bringing some of those things to our customers. How we're making sure that they're effective and efficient in delivering the value that or the promise of AI, and maybe some tips and tricks from the panelists around how they're driving their organizations forward.
Exciting.
All right. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everybody for being here. Maybe just to get us started a little bit. We're the group of us agreed we're not necessarily going to talk our books. We've all got offerings in the space, and we wanted to make this more of a conversation about what we're doing as leaders to make sure that our organizations are becoming AI first and embracing the agentic capabilities that both we're developing for our customers, but also some of the experimentation that we're doing internally and learning within our own organizations. One of the things we believe is that the best ideas are coming from our teams, and all of us selling sort of go-to-market capabilities. Our subject matter experts are our employees, and so we have a great opportunity to learn from them as we teach them, but also then to collaborate and cross-pollinate great ideas that we find within our organizations. They oftentimes help us come up with new go-to-market capabilities, new products, and new ideas. And so one of the things that we wanted to talk about or start off on is how we're using agents and AI inside of our own organizations and how we're developing our own teams. And so maybe get the team started off with an easy question. We'll start off with how do you make sure that everybody inside your organization is leveraging the power of AI, not just the few that are your top performers, but how do you get everybody moving? And Santi, you're on my screen. Maybe we'll start with you. How do you make this an everybody approach versus just a handful of folks?
Yeah, so we're a vendor in the AI space, so we're very much AI forward. We're also a small company, so we see AI as kind of that edge that could allow us to overcome a bigger company out there we're competing against. So I think about this all the time. In fact, I've been interviewing my own customers and other vendors to see what best practices they see. And a pattern that I really like is the idea that leadership is a key driver for transformation on this front, and that literacy of AI is essential at the top. So having CROs, CEOs, CTOs that deeply understand the different tools and technologies at their disposal. So if you're talking to a CTO, it's probably Codex and Claude Code. If you're talking to a CRO, you're looking at the offerings in the sales tech space to see what are your options. It is actually a counterintuitive approach. Most CROs are really good at delegating. As you start going to the top of the org, you start putting in your lieutenants and the front lines to be the ones exploring. But the depth of transformation that AI can deliver really needs to penetrate all the way to the top. So that's my personal advice is get after ChatGPT, create yourself a Gemini account, go in 11 labs and generate some voices. I think it can be really powerful for the whole org.
Love it. Love it. Hannah, how about yourself?
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I've started doing some of that myself, and I feel like now more than ever, I get so much value from these networking events because I get to hear what others are doing. And I went to an event a couple weeks ago, and I heard the CRO of OpenAI there, and she was talking about how she built a chat GPT so people could, send emails on her behalf, and they sounded like her. And just even something small like that, I totally agree with you, Santi. It kind of sets the tone. If you kind of go and create something, it serves as a good example for your team of what can be done in addition to hiring great people. Like, I think it's absolutely critical that we have folks on our team, whether they're in RevOps or go-to-market engineering, that can build things quickly and that are meaningful for the rest of the org. So I think hiring is also really important for these skill sets.
Yeah, for sure. We're definitely seeing folks come into the hiring process with some skills and experience different than we'd seen maybe 18 or 24 months ago. And we're definitely seeing folks who have spent time in learning their own frameworks and have their own tactics and techniques. One of the people that introduced, the person that introduced Santi and I is Cal Norton, who many of us listen to and read his content, but he's all about experimenting and bringing these capabilities to the edge. So he's been a great example of that. Maybe get a little more specific and maybe ask some other folks on the call. What specific programs maybe has anybody implemented in terms of bringing these capabilities to your team? Anything around forecasting, pipeline generation, outbounding, things like that. Would love to hear how you're bringing these capabilities to your team with some more specificity. I don't know, Aaron or James, maybe you've got something to share with us.
Yeah, one of the things that I encouraged our team probably 4 or 5 months ago was, don't request headcount, request more tokens, right? And what that kind of enabled them to go and do is the minute they got into a bind or a pinch, felt overwhelmed, instead of always coming and saying, hey, we need to hire another engineer. It's like, go find the applications, test them, budgets are there, come back to me with the results. And I think kind of enabling and empowering the team to think this way. We've seen a great shift. Even, a head of product jumped in the other day, got himself a few accounts, and he's just now writing code. And he wasn't doing that 6 months ago. And so I think giving them the freedom and conviction to go and do it, try those tools, and implement it in the daily workflows is really helping us right now.
For sure. Yeah, I love hearing that. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, I think just kind of a touch on each of them. I think one of the biggest that we find when this first started, call it a year ago, I felt like we were the C-suite that Santi was mentioning. We were telling everybody to use AI more, and it was more of a standing on a pedestal telling, I hate to admit it, but kind of like the old guy in the room now, like, use AI, kids. And I think it wasn't until we really started leaning into it as an executive team. And I think the biggest way we've driven it internally, and yes, we're in the space too. I think we're all trying to sell our own, call it agentic solutions, whether you're AI native or not. I think there's a combination of things that we did that really started to drive internal adoption. And I think the biggest one is we created an incentive for solving problems with agents that we build internally. And when we started doing that at the executive level, I looked at my day-to-day and I would say everybody on here has probably dealt with this to some degree, Mark, especially in very large orgs. Probably 50% of my inbound Slacks across a team of 2,000 GTM folks is, do you know this person? You're connected on LinkedIn, do you know them? And I think 5 to 8 years ago, there was probably a connection where I actually did know them. Now it's completely, I probably don't know 90% of them. And so we created an agent that goes through first-party data, goes through calls, goes through emails, calendar, like, have I ever met with this person? And then it takes a variety of things from job history, location, alma mater, so on and so forth, and it creates a relationship score. And again, this is not a ZoomInfo product we're selling, so I promise this isn't a pitch. This was truly just a problem where we knew we had the data across different systems, and we could at least quiet the noise on 80% of these Slacks to say, James and Mark, unequivocally, they know each other. They've met 9 different times. They work in the same space, all of these different data points. So it creates this James agent. So they can ask that. It spits out a score of like an 8 to 10 based on all of those attributes. And then it can go into the James emailer, if you will. And so I think it wasn't until we started solving problems like that internally and then getting them out to the team so they could see it, that trickle down effect of, okay, what's the most annoying part of my day? What is the least efficient part of my day? And having people solve those with agents they can build with relative ease. That's kind of the carrot. We started then incentivizing. We gave a bounty. If you have an agent that gets built, if you're an account manager and you build an agent that does great prep or great historical context or great point of view, and then people start using that, there's like an adoption and utilization threshold internally. Once the company starts using that agent that individual has built, we give them a spiff, we give them recognition, all of those different things. That's the carrot side of it. And I think now in a world where AI can do a lot of the things that make your great salespeople, like account planning, like account briefs, like prep, point of view, so on and so forth. The stick is if folks aren't leveraging those agents, I think it's probably the only time in my career, at least, there is not a compelling answer as to why they would not be using that. It's like trying to hit home runs against Mark McGwire back in the 90s. Not using performance enhancers. So, we've had a very aggressive stance on folks that are not using those agents for those particular use cases.
I love that. The carrot and stick and the story around the connection. I think all of us get that question all the time. Do you know this person? That was a great tutorial for all of us. Angela, how about you? From a marketer's perspective, how are you thinking about bringing these capabilities to your team and putting some structure around it in the marketing side of the business?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe I'll just dovetail into what James was sharing as well, and about how you incentivize learning, because I think it's true across sales and marketing. But something we've seen be really successful is having people sit down and have, one-on-one sessions where they go through things together. So, to give an example of that, we had a marketing ops manager who was helping pull lists for an event for our events manager, and the SDR who was doing all the pre-event, outreach and meeting setting. And it was really interesting because our marketing ops manager no one in that group is technical, but used AI to generate a script that scrubbed the event page of 1,000 event attendees and then got it auto enriched. And it was funny because we attended the same event last year. It took that team about 2 days to enrich that entire list and even just get the list of event attendees. And having the marketing ops manager sit down with the events manager and the SDR who were doing all of this pre-qual work and just being here's how I got it to generate a script. Running a script on a page is not a Gen AI workflow per se, but Gen AI is enabling non-technical people to run these really basic things that then, take 2 days worth of work and turn it into less than an hour of work. And so we have basically what has been really interesting to me is that, Mark, you asked in your question, what's a structured way of doing this? The most effective way we've seen has been unstructured learning, of really just sitting down next to someone, watching them do it. And so what we've been trying to do is create a structured environment to celebrate those things and elevate them so that we encourage more people to have that kind of organic learning, I would say. So it's been really interesting. I think for a while, I think maybe 12, 18 months ago, we were trying to do a lot more structured learning on it. But it really is, thinking back to early in our careers. I'm going to date myself here also as, the old person in the room now, but I started my career as a consultant. The first 6 months, everyone knew your first 6 months you were useless, and you just sat next to a senior associate and learned how to do Excel and learned how to make slides and do all the other kind of workflow things until one day you weren't useless anymore. And Gen AI is really interesting in that it's really making us all think back to that beginner's mindset and be like, wow, I just need to sit down next to someone who knows how to do this. And in my case, it's almost always someone more junior than me, but I'm learning from them. And how do I start to adopt that technology in that, kind of organic use case by use case way? And I think that's true across sales and marketing.
I love that. A bunch of comments from old people. I think we're all roughly the same age. I don't think I ever felt like the old person in the room, but maybe we're finally there. I'll tell you what we're doing at Sales Loft, and then we'll kind of jump into the next part of the conversation. What we've done is we've had these what we call these collab sessions, so collaboration, play on collaboration and laboratory, where our teams are putting together what they're doing in the market, and they're sharing them with their peers and colleagues. And so, how are we creating tighter points of view? How are we doing better discovery? How are we doing better, more on point presentations? I think you take some of that together with some of the incentives that James talked about, and there may be that example of what does the unstructured and structured look like together, because there's a lot of peer-to-peer sharing in these sessions that we do biweekly. We amplify and share them all across the company, but what we haven't done is put the incentive structure in the system like they did at ZoomInfo, which I think is a super exciting idea for all of our employees. So that's awesome. All right, so moving on a little bit in terms of AI time to value. Love to talk a little bit about what's some of the ideas out there in terms of misconceptions around time to value. We're hearing some companies talk about building agents, and it's taking 6, 12, 18, 24 months to get to value. That certainly seems like a long time when we're seeing some companies get from zero to $500 million in a year in the AI space, and nobody's waiting 18 months for those capabilities. So we'd love the group's perspective on what are some of the misconceptions about how long it takes to get value out of these AI capabilities. And Aaron, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think, when we started to release our product and we're working on interviewing CROs and VPs of RevOps, this was one thing that just kept coming up. We've all seen, the MIT study, 95% of POCs failing. And I think, there's kind of two pieces to it. One is the limitations of the technology itself. And secondly, the implementation and kind of how those expectations are dealt with. And so for us, we don't have CSMs right now. We're a small startup. I am the CSM. And so I get to go in and sit down, watch the onboarding flow take place, see the type of questions and workflows that our customers want to see in their organization. And what I'm finding, and I don't know how everyone else feels, but the expectations and I think the reality right now, there is still a gap. And I think that's why it does fail in some instances. And this is not, in using our product, but in testing other products as well, of what are we really trying to get out of these POCs? What are those, achievements? What are the KPIs that say, yes, this did work? But what I'm seeing is the appetite. We always talk about dog food, right? The ability to just put anything in front of a dog. It's going to consume it. It wants it. It needs it. It doesn't care about the protein mix, etc. And that's what we're seeing is people are just craving for the technology to work. And so I think being able to go in and I know most people on the call do this, actually sit with the customer, figure out the expectations before launching into a POC. But then being able to, essentially hold the hand for as long as possible until the outcomes are being delivered. And that's something, we're obviously keeping a close eye on and tracking internally.
For sure. What are some of those key or KPIs that we should be thinking about as we start to put some some performance capabilities around these agents? What are some of the KPIs you all look for?
I mean, I think there's a range of things we look for, and I would say it is a pretty big range, because there's some things where you can see time to value really, really quickly, like in a matter of days, you start seeing, more pipeline. There's other things that might take a couple of months. So I think it depends on exactly what you're looking at. And then the KPIs can be different too. But I would encourage everyone, I mean, we really try and look at not just sort of like input metrics in terms of like activity levels, but actually more of those like output metrics. Like, is it actually driving pipeline for us? Is it actually driving revenue for us? So beyond some of like, are people using it? Do they like it? Do we actually think it has a tie back to revenue? And like, when we talk to vendors, really diving into that. And then also when we're looking at time to value, I know at my previous company, we tried a lot of different solutions in the early days. And some of them we actually had really successful POCs with, but then like the usage and the excitement kind of tapered off over time. So I also think just, the other side of the coin to time to value, and I have conversations like this with, people looking at our solution is, okay, well, what's going to happen in 3 months from now and 6 months from now? And having those proof points and customer stories is just as important. And when you're looking at solutions, to ask for those kinds of things.
For sure. James, I saw you come off mute.
Yeah, I think to the MIT study in the 95.5, I think two things. The first one, in terms of the time to value and in terms of getting value out of just about any of these tools, I do think, and Aaron, I know you guys are very close on this as well. The data foundation, getting that right, where a lot of these tools will sit on top of CRM or sit on top of some data that might not be ready for AI, if you will. And I think getting that data foundation right across your data lake, across CRM, first party, third party, so on and so forth. I think before folks can really hit that warp speed of getting value from all of these things, they've got to start there. And I think over the past year, we've all been on the other end of that really cool whiz bang AI use case. Somebody on your team sees it, they show it around the org, everybody gets excited about it, they deploy it, and if the data foundation's not right, then ultimately you don't get that expected outcome. I think on the metrics, once you do have that foundation right, we've got a framework internally where there's really three buckets that AI should be driving an outcome. It's either headcount reduction, increased efficiency, major metrics, if you will, and then cost savings, which kind of goes into the headcount side. But I think cost savings can be more than just reduction of headcount. And so I think what we see is it's not always that first metric that is the most important. Like one of the most obvious is time saving. And I think that was the first 6 months of the AI boom. It was all about time saving. And so we've got an agent internally that we can go, any rep, any team, and say, show me all of the things, all the time that they've spent. And so we have this use case. There's an individual, he's an enterprise account manager. He's got 15 accounts, all large enterprise. And you can say, okay, if one of these accounts, show me what he's done. 35 hours of actual face-to-face meetings or Zoom meetings, and then 85 hours of prep, docs, decks. It takes all the data from, Google Docs, all the decks he's built in PowerPoint, so on and so forth. And, that 85 hours of prep work for 35 hours of meeting, to cut that down to 10 with all of these generative AI use cases where they can get the account plan, they can get the deck, they get the point of view, great. But then what does he do with those 75 hours? And I think like the initial, great, this guy, his name's Josh, it's the example we always use. This guy, Josh, saved 75 hours. Now what? If Josh is not allocating those hours to other more productive things, now Josh just has more time and a better work-life balance. I'm not against that. But I think that's where when people deploy some of these products or they go implement a bunch of these products with time savings as the only KPI, they're missing when their CFO comes calling saying, why are we spending $2 to $3 million more? But we're not seeing any meaningful output change. We're just seeing time savings. And so it's basically like, what is that as you're procuring or as you're piloting any of these products? It's like, sure, we'll get those 75 hours back, and then we'll see calls increase. We'll see the 35 hours of actual in-person meetings increase. We'll also see the ability to touch more of those 15 accounts increase. So potentially we could go from a world where I think most of us in the enterprise try to shrink account loads so you can have better relationships and closer to the customer and you want to get account loads down. In this new world, can we take account loads up? So now we're not only getting more productivity in terms of call output, in terms of meetings, in terms of driving upsell growth, renewal, so on and so forth, but now we can also give this guy 5 more accounts because he doesn't have to waste 75 hours on each of them in just prep work. And so now we are not only hitting output, we're also hitting cost savings and headcount reduction because we don't need to go hire 100 more enterprise AM. So I think it's really important to track the initial thing that you're looking for and then what's that going to yield so that we all as CROs or CMOs, Angela, in your case, welcome, CMO to the group, we can stand taller in our investments by showing the actual outcome, not just the time saving.
Yeah. No, a lot of people are talking about that time savings. We got to move beyond that into real hard dollars. Santi, you see this from the bridge, given what Momentum does. We'd love to hear your perspective on some of the insights around KPIs and most effective sort of metrics that you're seeing at Momentum.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to share, kind of riffing off of James's last bit and Aaron as well. I think given that we sell to revenue organizations, I think this is a pattern that is more present on the revenue side of the aisle, even marketing, but not as much as in engineering, because engineering is already pretty staffed up on technical resources. But one new quality of this new trend is that agentic workflows, agents, this level of sophisticated automations, they're inherently a technical challenge. And we see that the time to value or the ratio of success tends to be a function of how technical are the resources that you're putting behind that project, and how much ownership do they have to push it through to get it done. People forget that in the end, you're building automations. They're smarter automations, but the person that builds that needs to think in systems, needs to understand foundational data, make sure that the data is there, needs to think about scale. So when we see failures, is because you're grabbing somebody who is not really that adept to think about systems and processes, and you put them to, magically try to make something work with ChatGPT, and it tends to flunk. But so this is an interesting pattern. I think moving forward, organizations will start developing their own ops teams that are a little bit more technical and a little more staffed up from an engineering standpoint to execute these projects, because the projects pay off if you do them right.
For
Mark,
sure.
real quick, if I can, one of the things we've seen is like even discovery questions have changed, right? We always talk about appetite, preparation, and trust, right? As we go into these calls, everyone says they have an appetite for AI and they want to go and change the world with it. But how prepared are you? To James's point, like what is the level of your data? How clean is it? The AI can only get the results it can get on the preparation of that data. And then trust, and the trust comes into the outcomes, working with the teams to develop those outcomes. And so even from, that discovery standpoint, almost disqualifying early, not everyone is ready. Not everyone has that appetite. Not everyone can go and just deploy this as quickly. And I think that is having a significant result on the outcomes of a lot of these POCs as well. And Angela, I'm so sorry for cutting you off. Sorry about that.
No, all good. I was just going to add to this because I love this discussion so much. It's something we think so much about. We promised we wouldn't talk our book, but Invisible is an evals and annotation platform. And so the KPI I would push everyone on is, are your models actually getting better? I think what makes Invisible unique in the space is, the Surges and Mercors of the world also work with the major model providers, as do we. But we work a lot on the enterprise side. And exactly to James's point, I would say 90% of enterprises that we work with, they actually don't have any issues with their Gen AI models. They have issues with their data foundation. But once you get your data foundation in place, the question becomes, what is your loop between your underlying data that's feeding the model and then the evaluation of, is your model working? Like, can you genuinely answer that question? And when, especially, when your reps realize the model isn't working, is that data getting fed back to improve the model and show where it's breaking down? So I would actually argue, I think we all know benchmarks don't work. Custom evals really have to be the standard. But then do you have the custom annotation and, the ways to point out where you can improve the model? And do you have that as a virtuous cycle and a loop connecting your data, the evaluation, the annotation, and then feeding back into the underlying data? So my push would be, any KPI really needs to be based at the workflow level. But across an organization, I think one way to look at it is, do you have models in place, time to value, kind of all those baseline expectations, but then are your models actually improving over time? Is that time savings? Is it getting shorter and shorter every time? Are you layering more and more of these different workflows in place?
Yeah, for sure. So we're not everybody's at the same place on the call, and so maybe there's some folks who are earlier in this journey than the rest of us. And I talked to a lot of CROs, and they say, "Oh, no, we're using Gen AI, and all my reps have ChatGPT, and it's working great." So maybe we want to ask the group a question about proprietary models versus some of the more sort of horizontal or generally available models out there. How are you using them both in your environments? What do you lean towards in terms of proprietary model that's got guardrails on it, or giving your reps access to some things like ChatGPT? Maybe a little pro con of what the difference is in your organizations. I don't know, Santa, you came off mute. What are you seeing?
I have a strong opinion here. I think all the foundation model companies out there, they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars training very sophisticated models. It takes them a year to put them together. I just think it's very hard to consider that a company like ours, or even a public company that is not dedicating billions of dollars into this journey, could accomplish anything close to something like ChatGPT or Claude Sonnet. So I'm a big fan of saying use vanilla models, and the real edge is on the data you feed the model, the context you provide, and the engineering of the prompt and the sophistication of the task it accomplishes. So my team is, We switch. Currently we're using Gemini, but we're kind of switching between Gemini, ChatGPT, and Claude for most of the work we do. And then, of course, specialized tools. And the way they differentiate is, are they integrated into our stack? Do they execute complex tasks that my team needs that perhaps would be cumbersome to do by hand on top of ChatGPT? That's, of course, what we ultimately sell from the momentum standpoint to sales teams, but it applies to the whole organization.
For sure. Hannah, how about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just kind of build off of what James and Angela were saying in terms of the data that you're putting into it, and without going into our product, I mean, one of the things I do think about a lot is like, what is the unique IP that we have as a company that will differentiate us? So for us, it's like all those conversations that our AEs are having. We do a lot of work training our AEs, training our SDRs on what questions to ask, how do you elicit a good response? What is that data that you're capturing in all those conversations? And so for us, like that data is really important that feeds back into all of the models that we have when we go back out to clients and when we understand a little bit more about their business. So I think it's not as much for us like what model are we using as opposed to like what data are we putting into it, and specifically what data are we capturing with the human side of the job that is unique to us and we think is our unique IP.
For sure. Aaron, how about for your organization in terms of the general models or something more specific, and how you harvest the information on the back end to be able to learn more quickly inside of your business?
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly kind of where we sit. We always say ChatGPT was built for 8 billion people and for taco recipes, right? It's not about the models themselves. It's what we're feeding it. It's the context behind that. And so that's kind of what we focus on is building that orchestration layer of the MCPs to be able to get the right context at the right time from the right applications. And then the results are going to be better. And so I don't think there's much more I can say to what Santi said as well.
Yeah, for sure. Switching topics a little bit, we hear a lot about, either fully autonomous or human in the loop. Curious what folks are thinking about there. I know maybe a couple of years ago when the start of this was all about augmenting human capabilities, and as things have changed and we've looked for more efficiency, we're saying, hey, like Aaron, you said, how are we replacing the people with these tokens? So what's the group's view on either fully autonomous or human in the loop in terms of how you deploy these capabilities?
I mean, I'll jump in with, I think, one of the funniest, probably unknown paradigm shifts that we're seeing today. If you look back 12, 18 months ago, it was AI is going to replace salespeople. And that was a lot of noise around that. And I'm sure what many feel, if not all, is the most obvious thing that AI has done is really impact inbound from AIO, AI search, people just using the summary in Gemini, or people just going to GPT, and none of those have yet monetized search engine optimization of old. And so there's no way to pay your way up top. And so you saw Monday announce a couple weeks ago, heavy PLG, heavy inbound company. HubSpot, I think, said they were down 70% on inbound. And so a lot of firms are now moving heavier outbound. And so they're actually hiring more salespeople to go outbound, because I think everybody is in the midst, depending on where they are in the journey, of like, hey, our inbound volume is down 25, 30, 40%. And Angela, I'm sure you're in a lot of CMO roundtables where this is a hot topic. And everybody's now going, hey, we got to fix Reddit. We got to, YouTube. What are people saying about us? What ChatGPT is searching? And I think in that shift, we're seeing, again, more humans being hired in outbound. And so to the fully autonomous versus human in the loop, I think this concept of intelligent outbound is bringing great salespeople back into the mix. And I think what at least we're seeing from a hiring perspective, you used to have to make this trade-off of, hey, this person might not be as charismatic, might not have as high EQ, IQ, et cetera, but they're willing to make 1,000 phone calls in a given day. And I think now with Gen AI, you can hire this different class, if you will, of sales folks, because so much of that drudgery that used to make sales a horrible place to be can be automated, and it can be a bit easier. And so you're really looking for that quote unquote human in the loop from an outbound where, yeah, if you can get the right place, the right time, the right message, the right contact, all of those informational points, and just, your job is to be great when you finally connect with Mark. I think that's where the human in the loop, the not being replaced by AI piece, especially in sales, we're seeing that like by a long shot. I think in certain areas, I forget who mentioned it, but there are low-hanging fruit areas where it is just primed for fully autonomous. Password reset in support, those areas I think has probably been the biggest and most obvious use case in terms of support team shrinking for the very low end tier one support. And I think then repurposing the great tier one folks into tier two, tier three, as these products, inevitably everybody's bringing AI into their products. They get more complex. There's a pathway for those folks to move up into bigger and better roles while you fully automate the tier one. So I think it really is use case dependent in terms of where can you fully automate and where do you still need a human in the loop.
Awesome.
I
Hannah, would
agree
love to hear your view on that. Oh,
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I totally agree with that. And I think there is something fundamentally different about the sales use case. Like if you think about customer support, you have a question, you want that question answered, maybe somewhat similar in like the legal space. Whereas sales, I mean, if you typically have a problem to be solved, but you're not like, oh, this is the solution I want. You're looking at a variety of solutions. There's a lot of nuance to which solutions are going to fit which parts of your problem. So I think that the use case for AI and sales just is different. So I think humans are going to stay in the loop much, much, much longer than some other functions.
Not only
sure,
that,
yeah.
Go ahead, Santi.
I'll finish that thought because I got opinions there too. I think not only are they going to stay in the loop for longer, I think humans are becoming more critical in that loop. Buying is a trust act, right? When I commit to a vendor and I sign a contract for 1 or 2 years, what I'm doing is I'm deciding if I trust them to, be the ones delivering on the other end. And in the world in which content has been completely democratized and the world is overflowing with blog posts and articles and all the things that in the past you would use to derive trust in a brand, it becomes then a human relationship. So I do think, and I agree that there is a function to like how important the job is. If you do something that is, not as important, then you can fully replace with AI and run fully automatic. And that's what we push for our own customers when we're doing things like data extraction from calls. But when you want to buy software and the contract is large enough, there is no going away from having a person be the one on the other side you talk to, and they're making a commitment to deliver before you sign, which is quite counter what's the thought du jour, I would say.
Yeah. Angela, I want to go to you, but we all thought Excel was going to replace accountants, right, in the late 70s, and there's more of them than ever before. So I think it's a long game, certainly. Angela, what do you think?
Totally. I was just going to add, I completely agree with everything that's been said, and I'll add it's adding some interesting friction to the sales and marketing relationship from the standpoint of my best channels, I am investing a ton in field marketing, in hosted events, alliance marketing, PR, getting people up on stages, especially our senior sellers. And it's adding some really interesting friction around routing because it used to be, oh, we have an inbound lead and it just gets routed to the next person, territory owner. And now I have this decision of, hey, I got us a speaking slot at this particular industry event. I have 2 senior sellers who could be a fit. Maybe one hasn't had an opportunity in a while, but maybe one's better on stage. Or, hey, I've gotten a lot of signal that says this account is very, very warm. It's technically assigned to this person, but this person is in a closer geography and I know they will get on a plane to go meet with them in person, which makes such a big difference at our ACVs. So that has been a really interesting thing for me and kind of just wanted to share, the friction point of, I think we are going to have to rethink about routing and how we handle, especially as we move to this world where, exactly to Santi's point, at these large deal sizes, nothing replaces in-person connection. And so, to James's point on EQ really deeply matters. That element, I think, is constantly something that our marketing team is talking about is like, hey, we think we got this PR slot. It kind of fits better for this person given their background, but like we think this person would actually be more charismatic on stage. How do we think about those decisions and how do we work across a go-to-market organization to drive the best outcomes for the organization?
Yeah, for sure. We're seeing a lot of different people take the stage in our organization and others, and seeing us amplify the voices of our sellers and our RevOps people in ways that we didn't plan to before. So I think you're definitely onto something there. There's different makeup of what the go-to-market team looks like, especially as we go forward in this space. One of the things go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to add one thing to James's point. I think, yes, we're going to see an increase in headcount for sales reps, the closers. over a year ago, I talked about this concept of sales becoming like the NFL, right? Everyone plays football in high school. Everyone can catch a ball. Everyone can run. You get to college, it's just better and better. And only the select few make it. And, people were selling in 2018, 2019, 2020. Budgets were open, products were selling themselves. And now what we're seeing is you have to fight for every dollar, and it's the best of the best. And it's those that do the extra sleep, that run the extra laps, that go that further mile, that adopt AI to make themselves more efficient. Not only will we have more, but I think we'll start to see only the best of the best kind of stay in these, high-end enterprise sales roles. And people like James get to be more selective, right? The interview questions have changed. How do you apply AI? How are you more efficient? How are you better? How do you catch better than the person next to you who can also catch? So I just want to add that real quick.
Yeah, I think that's certainly certainly happening. And one of the statistics we talk a lot about is, customers are 80 or 85% of the way through the buying process once they want to engage a salesperson. And when I first heard that statistic, I thought, well, I used to have 100% of the sales process to influence my buyer. Now I've got 15%. So to your point around the NFL, I got to make the 15% really count because I don't have all the other opportunities to engage that customer. I got to nail it on the first conversation or the second conversation because my opportunity for failure is I get so much fewer of those opportunities. All right. One of the things we did at SalesLoft, I think, is super interesting that we came up with through an experimentation is we built what's called the Office of Pipeline. And it's really an intermingling of marketing in our sales organization and sales programs. And so what we did is we took some of the SDR capabilities, the ability to analyze data from our RevOps team, the ability to create programs and marketing activities and events for marketing, and put that together in the Office of Pipeline, and to deliver that stuff to our sellers into their environment so they can go do that outbound much easier with much less friction. So that's been a really interesting hybrid role that's been created where it's part data scientist, it's part former maybe BDR, and it's part marketer, all coming together into a hybrid role that is proven to be really, really interesting for folks in their careers, but also interesting for our sellers to engage with those folks because they get a real partner in building pipe, and they're doing that stuff on their own. So it's become an interesting experiment internally for our folks. All right. So maybe to round it out, as we think about maybe one piece of advice that you all would give the folks on the call in the session about how to best leverage AI in your go-to-market environment, would love to get your best piece of advice each, and that'll take us home on this one. James, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, I've got a real-time one that some people might get a chuckle out of. In that period of time, call it 9 months ago, when we were pushing hard to drive AI adoption, and we had our own product, and that was great, but really driving more innovative, agent building internally. I think we skewed heavily on the incentive for the agent building. And at one point, our account management teams call it 450. And there were close to 5,000 agents that account managers had created within the organization. And so we probably had a couple hundred that were account planning based, a couple hundred that were point of view based. And as they were building these, at first we were highlighting these great agents being built. And then we realized, I don't really care if these 450 are great agent builders. I want them to be using the best agents that the best people have built. And so we kind of flipped that on its head, and we started a full enablement. We picked the 8 to 10 per segment, per vertical, per function. Said these are the best as of today, and the folks that built the best ones, now they're on this Tiger team, and they are the ones that can go tweak and change and kind of improve or add a new. But shifting that focus, I think so many people, to the earlier conversations, have been just like, use AI, get AI, use AI, be great at being an AI person. When you think about most of the org, I want our account managers to be leveraging AI to drive great outcomes of things they weren't doing before. Become a vertical expert in a week versus having to be in that vertical for a decade. I think incentivizing the outcomes, incentivizing the use of great agents versus our entire company needs to be great agent builders. That was a real-time miss that we had. It was great to light the pilot to get everybody in there thinking about it and playing with it. But then we realized that what we really want is these folks to be using it and experts in using it versus building it. So that's one piece of advice, real time, that we learned the hard way.
Love it. Awesome. Santi, how about yourself?
I do have two. One is very short though, and seconding on a lot of thoughts everybody shared. To make a really strong point, you got to get your CRM data under control. Full stop. It's unacceptable. Before it was all about pipeline reviews. Now it's about building workflows and actually getting results. So that's number one. Real quick, I have a fun one. Run an AI hackathon. We just came back from an offsite. I got this shirt there. It was at the beach, so everybody got a linen shirt. And we're a small company, so 100 people. But we ran a company-wide hackathon. We sat SDRs next to developers, next to RevOps, next to marketing. And we had a lot of really fun exercises, from designing the mascot for our company to putting together a 2-minute ad video, and just seeing the level of learning between all these different types of people in my company. Some of them are very AI forward. Others had never used ChatGPT before. Come together, use 11 Labs to put together a podcast ad, or using Google VO3 to generate a video. I think it's a really, again, it's not a repeatable motion, but I think it can get you from 0 to 50 at a pretty high scale of the organization. It's worth doing every time if you can find a day or two for your company to take a break.
Yeah, we love doing things like that. It just sort of breaks through some of that tension, service tension that may exist. You don't do it all the time, but it gets people inspired a little bit. Hannah, how about yourself?
Yeah, I think one thing I've learned is, in the early, I've been at my current company for about 6 months. It was just like, try everything. Like, let's have people develop things. There's a million things we could do, and all of these things are cool and fun, and they're fun to build, and they get some impact. I think, where we've come is like, and our CEO talks to me about this a lot, is like, okay, what are the things that are actually, like, what are the actual problems? Like, what are the things we need to fix? Like, how do we prioritize it? And how are we either building or buying things around that? So just like being really clear about what are those biggest areas of impact for the organization, whether it's efficiency or pipeline building or whatever it is, and putting more of your resources there. Because I think we spread ourselves a little too thin with some of the things that we were doing in the past. And yeah, that focus is important, and centering on the actual business results.
Yeah. Keeping people focused. I think we can get a little experimental sometimes
Yeah.
and go off the butterfly path. Aaron, how about
Sometimes it's
yourself?
worth it because you come up with really cool things. You're like, wow, that took half a day, and now it's saving everyone hours and hours. So I definitely don't want to limit the experimentation, but just being really thoughtful about why are we doing this experiment, and what do we think it's going to drive.
Love that. Aaron, how about yourself?
Yeah, Mark, forgive me for using a British reference here, but you go to London, you're on the tube. Every single time you get on the train, they say, mind the gap. And I think that's where AI comes in. It's like, it's doing those gaps, the things we don't think about as sellers, the little bits updating the CRM, sending the follow-up email, etc. I think that is where the impact comes in. And if you still have gaps, you're not applying AI well enough right now. So, little takeaway, mind the gap.
I love that. Yeah, it makes all of us a little bit better by checking all of the things we might not maybe consider, maybe some of that great research, or what are the things in my process that I haven't really fully baked out. So mind those gaps. I love that. Angela, how about yourself?
Yeah, I'll just maybe a slight hot take. I think we've all also seen that data on what Gen AI is doing to new grads. And I would say I'm actually very bullish on hiring super smart, super scrappy folks out of college who are really native in these tools and maybe haven't seen how a normal go-to-market org should function. How does that sales marketing, RevOps relationship all work? Which I think would lead to my second piece of advice, which is, I would really consider being really flexible on org charts, titles, roles, and responsibilities for the next few years, because I think what we've been seeing is our go-to-market, our traditional titles and swim lanes have been very designed for the past era. They have not been designed for the Gen AI era. And as a marketing leader, I'm really struggling to figure out, should I only be hiring senior folks who know how to use these tools? Oh my gosh, actually, maybe a senior person who really understands how product marketing should work with a junior person who really understands Gen AI tools, and pairing them together. And that's actually a really good pod. Like, there's all sorts of experimentation that we're doing. So maybe this is going anti-Hannah's point on like, be careful of the experimentation. I would say we're really experimenting on future of org chart. But But to Hannah's point on always being intentional about why are we doing this? What is the root problem we're trying to solve? I think I would say really don't get too stuck in, structures, titles, things that have come from a different era. Because I think the next few years are probably going to break a lot of org structures and create a lot of new roles that I think we're starting to understand what they look like, and why there's value in having an engineer sit in sales and marketing and, a true engineer and building out these tools. But that's something we've been playing with and haven't quite figured out, but it's been a very enlightening experience going through that journey.
Yeah, it sounded like a little bit of a plug for the humanities degrees that folks might be in college getting these days. Like dispense with some of those deep, maybe technical or rigid sort of ideas of what the world is, because it's all changing in front of us. So I loved hearing so many of the things here around be intentional, be focused, have the right outcome-based KPIs, make sure that we're maybe not living in the past in terms of org charts and structures. And the Office of Pipe example for us is one of those where it's not a role that we would have necessarily hired for previously. And when we look for who the folks are that were going to be successful, it was definitely a cross section of skills and experiences that may not have fit in a traditional sales role. So I think we're all seeing this stuff real time. Julia, I think you're going to take us get us some questions from the audience if there's any out there.
Yes, what an amazing session. Thank you so much, Mark. We have some questions here from Hans, and he's asking about agentic sales training and sales coaching. What are your thoughts? What are you doing at Sales Lab?
Yeah, so we use quite a bit of it. It's interesting. One of the things I'll talk at a sort of a high level. One of the things that we do a lot of training, we do a lot of knowledge checking, and one of the things that we had done when I first got here was managers reviewing and viewing those presentations by the reps. What we found was our reps are actually much more comfortable reviewing those into AI tools. They feel a little bit less judged, a little bit less, maybe a little less criticized in doing those in front of your manager. And so it's been requested by our team to give those capabilities to more of our sellers. And every time we do a knowledge transfer, we do a training, the reps actually ask to be judged by AI. And so gives it maybe a little bit less personal feeling in some senses, but a little bit more psychological safety. So that's been one thing we've done that our team has really reacted well to, but curious whether folks are seeing.
I think somebody mentioned it earlier on email writing, where you can, basically coach an agent to write emails like you do. We do the same thing with coaching. There's a me coaching agent. We have a CEO coaching agent, and we basically coach 50 calls. We train the model to understand how we would coach, and then we put that in place and it's automated. I would say that's a fun one. I think more foundational, we also, to the data foundation, we use Docket, we use Seismic, we use, from an enablement standpoint, but I think building all of those into the data foundation, pulling in from first party, pulling in from CRM, so you understand win-loss, op generation, conversion rates, what good looks like at scale when you can take all the first party information and then you can take the outcomes and you basically have, this is what great looks like, this is what mediocre, this is what bad looks like, but you have all of that sitting on a data foundation that then pumps out within your either internal chat, whomever it might be, or into your actual product set. I think it's probably the best time to enable at scale I've ever been a part of. But that's just an interesting thing we're doing.
Love that.
I do want to talk about coaching is an interesting one, and we do it ourselves, but it is a bit of a breakthrough use case because coaching before the age of AI was just so poorly done. It's just so labor intensive. No company out there with a high performing team had the time to really go deep and coach. If you have a rep that is taking 6 hours of calls a day, no manager, no enablement team would have the time to actually give full coverage to that rep. But in the age of AI, you can listen to every call. You can analyze every single line they said. So it's like you're going from an age in which you were only able to watch one game for the team and try to guess if they were, in the running for winning the championship, to being able to watch every game. And all of a sudden you can give a complete read on how they're performing. So I do think it's a use case that everybody should be looking out for because it's a high yield one.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And just to take that analogy one step further, I mean, it's kind of crazy that we used to just like put AEs on the field, like biggest call or cold call or whatever it is, without any practice, really, maybe some back and forth role playing with the manager. And now you can just do this, 10 times a day with bots. It's pretty cool. And we're definitely leveraging that as well.
For sure.
Amazing. Curious to hear your thoughts, Mark, and everyone. Really, we just had Mark Roberge, and he's releasing a new book, The Science of Scaling. It's out now. I believe you know this, Santi, since he's an investor. But yeah, on the topic of the science of agentic scaling and generally agentic sales, Mark, how do you see the future configuration of a sales team? What's the ratio between humans, I know agents, and tech?
Yeah. I think there's been, as we talked on this call, that sales was sort of fully human led, and there was these ideas that, hey, it's going to be fully agentic, and it's going to replace the humans. Those are usually never the answers. They're usually somewhere in the middle, and I think we're finding that the answer is becoming these are capabilities that will replace some of the mundane, maybe less fun tasks that are part of this part of the business, but they'll make the parts of the business that are uniquely human better. The questions will get deeper and more thoughtful. The preparation will get better. The outputs, but the customers expect the bar becomes higher, and so folks will expect more value in a smaller, shorter engagement. So I think the future of this business will look like you'll have really, really highly powered account executives working with your most important customers. I think you're going to be seeing a lot of inbound be groomed through through AI agents and things like that, and you're going to be seeing a lot more maybe support roles that are helping the reps to understand the deeper data analysis, the deeper insights that we're garnering for our customers. So I think it's going to become a hybrid where those high end sales folks are going to become even more and more important. Maybe to Aaron's point, it's going to feel like the NFL at every turn.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think I'll maybe just chime in and say, I think we had these expectations when AI SDRs hit the market that you weren't going to have to hire SDRs. I don't know. Anyone put your hand up if that's your reality? I don't think it is. But the one thing I'm learning is, never bet against the technology either. And so it's more of like, how do we plug that in? How do we empower the humans that we do have to become better? But yeah, I'm optimistically cautious, I think, on where that technology can go. But we talked about this on the panel at length about there's no excuse now to be the best of the best, and everyone can do that. Even to the last question on sales coaching, you don't have to go knock on your manager's door or wait until you're not doing well to get the coaching. You can go and do that on your own. You can use AI to go and train yourself and become better every single day. And so, yeah, I think it's interesting to see where the technology will go in the very near future, but right now, still a bit of a gap, I think.
We have quite of a Angela, go ahead.
I was going to say, I can speak to this a little bit from a marketing perspective because I think it's a little more varied. But as I mentioned before, we're investing a lot more in field marketing, in-person events, like anything that is organic relationship building, I think is huge. And then about 5% of my team right now are engineers. And I think we'll probably ramp that up significantly as well, just because so much of that sales marketing relationship is reliant on the handoff process, and a lot of the handoff can actually be automated. But to the last question on where are we investing in agentic, I think intent-based marketing is a term that folks are really throwing around, but how do we get the signals to our sellers that they need to prioritize their leads appropriately? And there's all sorts of oh, this person from this company commented on this thing on LinkedIn, and then how do you marry that with like, oh, and they also went to college with one of our senior sellers, and how do you marry those types of signals? I think is something that we are investing a lot in, and I think the makeup of our organization is going to change somewhat dramatically as a result.
James?
Yeah, I mean, I think we touched on it briefly, but I started my sales career in 2010, and I think most AEs, most salespeople were full cycle, where you had to go find it, you prospected it, you ran the deal, you kind of grew up, you worked in the very low end of SMB. I think we're going to see a shift back to that. I see a lot more companies going towards at least some form of full cycle AE. You go back, I think Aaron brought up 18 through 22. There was so much inbound, there was so much budget, ZERP, all the good things that we fondly look back on. You could have this machine that basically no one was actually prospecting. You had SDRs, they were primarily catching inbound. So I think prospecting comes back in a big way, and I think we're seeing that. And I think, to the overarching. Now, that might last 9 months to 12 months. I think whoever can call 5 years, please let me know. And I would love to invest alongside of you. But I think ultimately for the next year, that's probably what it's going to look like. The ability to go reinvest in prospecting alongside a full cycle AE. I also think just one take on it. You look at most sales teams that have an SC, we've kind of said, hey, you don't need to know the product that well. An SC is going to do most of the heavy lifting. And when you think about what the rep needs to be accountable for in addition to that, it's almost impossible. You need to know the vertical, the sub-vertical, you need to know the segment, you need to have read their 10K, and this is one of 50 accounts that you have, and you need to be an expert across all of these different things. So companies will go out and they'll verticalize and they'll say, hey, here's my retail seller. There are little things that we've done, but I think the biggest change, I think, in agentic AI sales land is that we're actually giving salespeople a chance to be good again, because we've overwhelmed them with tools. It was like, hey, well, we're going to give you an SC, and then we're going to give you 20 different tools that are going to help you do all of these 20 different things. And when you look at the makeup of great salespeople, not always are they going to be the sitting in front of 3 monitors and an expert across 20 different tools. And so I think irrespective of whatever the AI tools are, the ability to input all of that knowledge and all of that context and all of that personalization so that they can do what they do best, which is get out to the field marketing events that Angela's throwing, which is go build relationships with customers. And an SC can help you on the product side, sure, but I think it's so much harder, to the 85% that Mark brought up, the fact that it is harder to sell anything than ever now. You have to have a point of view. You have to speak their industry, their language, their sub-segment vertical. You have to know their acronyms. It is almost impossible to be a great salesperson today, just given all of those shifts. And I think AI is the thing that should help them to be able to show up with the industry landscape, with the point of view, know their 10K, know that Mark was on this podcast, whatever it may be, so that I can just focus on what I do best, which is connect with Mark, build trust with Mark, present us as a trusted partner, et cetera. And so I think how that manifests across different go-to-markets, I don't know. But I do know there's going to be a lot more outbound with AIO, because I feel like that's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And whether they monetize search engine optimization or not, who knows? So it's going to continue to be a black box for at least the next 12 to 24 months.
Phenomenal panel.
Yeah, James, we're seeing the same things back to prospecting, back to full cycle, and I think of the what you just described as putting everybody in an Iron Man suit. It's going to have to make everybody as powerful and capable as they can be. So thank you to all everybody who joined us, Aaron, Angela, James, Santi, Hannah. Appreciate you joining us. Julia, I think you're going to take it over to a demo after this, right?
Definitely. Mark, lastly, where should our community go, and what's on the Sales Love roadmap as far as what you can share?
Awesome. Yeah, well, we're super excited about the combination we announced about a month ago. We are coming together with Clary over the next couple weeks, and we're in the final process of that. We really look forward to sharing the full vision of that revenue orchestration lifecycle management platform that we'll be bringing to the market, and it's the best of both worlds. There is another group of agents coming out. We announced a group back in early May that have been really well received by our customers, doing a lot of the automation work that a lot of the folks on the call talked about, and another group coming out as well in about 2 weeks that we're excited for the market to react to. And so that's where we're going, and we're really looking forward to it.
Amazing. Excited to see this in action. And thank you, everyone, once again.